Hello and happy May, everyone. My name is John Michael Moy, and I'm your host for today's Product That Counts webinar. Products That Count is a nonprofit dedicated to enriching the careers of over 500,000 product managers globally. We accomplish this through a variety of avenues, including our renowned industry awards, education webinars like the one you're attending today, and award-winning podcasts. Today, we're extremely honored to have Vartika Rawat, Vice President of Product at Mastercard, who is here to discuss why product data is so important and relevant in today's world. With over 12 years of experience in building leading product teams in fintech, data, and product space, she is leading customer-facing data products and product teams at Mastercard. In today's digital economy and landscape, data and AI understanding adoption is relevant and usually being adopted across all types of businesses, large and small. Vartika will be discussing the fundamentals of data products, delve into crucial considerations for successful development, and cover monetization strategies. When Vartika and I met a few months ago, I really appreciated her sharing her expertise and experience of how building data products is really about adding value to customers and business. So without further ado, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Vartika. Vartika, the stage is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John Michael. And I'm really excited to talk about this topic, which is near and dear to my heart, which is around building and monetizing customer-centric data products. So before we get started, I just wanted to give a preview of what we're going to cover in the 1 hour that we have today, which is not enough, obviously, to talk about such a broad topic, but we'll try and touch upon some of the key considerations and components of building data products, starting off with, just touching upon what really are data products so that we can have sort of the same baseline understanding of what they are. We'll talk a little bit about direct and indirect data monetization and look at how companies have employed either of the techniques within their own organizations. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the key considerations and principles as you think about building data products, some of which might be obvious, but easy to kind of forget as you're building data products, especially when you think about customer centricity. And then we'll also talk a little bit about some of the direct monetization strategies that we've seen various companies employ. So quite a few topics to cover, but we'll try and make our way through them. And just before we get started, just a little bit about me, and thank you, John Michael, for the kind introduction. But just to supplement that, I'm Vartika Rawat, as you all know, and I have been sort of operating in this intersection between data, product, and fintech for about 12 plus years, mostly in financial services. I started my career as a database developer and sort of did data analytics consulting, technology consulting, made my way into product management, mostly working on B2C fintech products. And in the recent years, I've worked mainly on data products and managed a portfolio of data products and built up a data product management team as well. So going into really starting off with talking about, why data products are, important, why we even here talking about it. So as most of you may be familiar, right? But it's important to sort of just emphasize this point. The volume of data has exploded over the years, right? And all of you are, mostly aware of the fact that, so much data is being generated online, so many digital transactions with e-commerce. So that's one of the key reasons, right, where the volume of data has exponentially grown. And one key fact, you can see in this graph, about over 90% of the data generated has been over the past 2 years, which is a mind-boggling fact, right? And this data is just continuing to grow. So that's one of the reasons there's just a huge volume of data. And the second one is around your storage and compute technology is getting cheaper day by day, right? And also now we are seeing with Gen AI, the AI techniques have also made rapid advancements. So the possibilities of what you could do with this data are really endless, right? And all companies now have the ability to take advantage of this data in really innovative ways. But this does require methodical thinking and understanding of, business, market, consumers. And all of this requires sort of a more product mindset applied to kind of data. So, which is why it's becoming extremely important. And we'll talk about a few companies who have, taken smart advantage of the data that they have and have really used it to their strategic advantage. Um, so going into, okay, so that's great for companies, organizations, business in general. But why should we care, as product managers? Why should you as a product manager care? So the field of data and AI, and now especially with Gen AI, there's so much buzz around that. Every day we're getting more and more information about them. More and more companies are sort of releasing their products in the space. So the field of data and AI is continuing to grow, and adoption by companies is also accelerating. And as I mentioned, right, with all this growth in data, new techniques that are coming in, all companies need more PMs that can, really kind of bring that product management mindset into this field and can infuse this into building products that can really add value to their customers and business. And so this really becomes important, as product managers to really understand these and learn and invest in this particular area to kind of increase your knowledge and continue to grow in this space. Because at some point, I think this will become relevant for product management managers, regardless of whether they are directly employed in the data product field. So it's critical for product managers to just invest in this and know about the advancements in this area. So let's start with sort of the baseline, getting a baseline understanding of what are data products. And really, this was going back to the first recognized definition, right? Data products. This was by DJ Patil, who was a former chief data scientist of the US government. And he had put forth this definition of data products as being something that it facilitates the achievement of an outcome through the use of data. Obviously a broad kind of definition, but if you think about it, eventually data has to be used to kind of facilitate a particular outcome, and that is really what defines what a data product is. And there has been a bit of debate about whether it's a data product or data as a product. So this is sort of an attempt at kind of showing how the two may differ. Really, it's all companies have your raw data. You're sort of applying some business logic to create more derived data out of it, and then there's AI models on top of it. So data as a product is really when you're applying that product thinking, product management discipline to managing that raw set of data. And also sometimes it is used when you are using your raw data set and selling that data directly in a raw format. But when you talk about data products, when you're using a combination of these to kind of facilitate an outcome and package that as a solution, then that really is where data products, the terminology really comes into picture. And that can be monetized directly or indirectly and offered in various formats to customers, which we'll also talk about, the different ways in which this could be offered via APIs, through a platform. It could be offered as a service. It could be embedded within, your existing products as well. So this hopefully helps kind of put together a picture of, how do you get from like the raw data to really the data products and how do you deliver them? And these products then can be sort of directly or indirectly monetized, right? We've seen different ways in which companies have sort of directly or indirectly monetized this data. And, direct monetization is where this data has been sold to customers directly as a product. And we'll talk about two examples later in the deck here, where this has been, employed by customers to sell directly by organizations to sell directly to customers as a product. In the case of Walmart, Illuminate, and also DoorDash as an example, and we'll look at Foursquare as well. And then indirect monetization has been, some of the companies have also employed data products for indirect monetization, which is really to get indirect benefits within their organization. For example, Starbucks has partnered with a company to get, location data insights, which has helped them understand, where they can open stores. And that has helped them really kind of target particular locations where they would be more profitable in generating revenue. So those are some of the key components around monetization. I'm just trying to get to the next slide here. And sorry, my setup at home, I've changed that a bit, so it's taking me a while. Great. So two examples that I was really keen on, bringing up, talking about, because they're really powerful examples that show how companies have really strategically used data to their advantage. So the first one here is around Foursquare. And Foursquare, I think most of us have used it at some point, for check-ins, or, we've become mayors of some of our favorite bars. And but when social networks really started emerging, they faced a lot of competition. When you had Facebook, Instagram, all of those social networks came up. So they had to really kind of think about a more sustainable model for their business. And in about, I think, 2014, they came about a new business strategy, which was really about, all the great data they had, location data they had. So they pivoted from, a social, B2C app to really pivoting to a location intelligence app, a B2B app. And now their data, the point of interest data, really sort of powers a lot of companies like Microsoft, Samsung, Twitter, and Uber, and they provide really accurate and a large volume of point of interest data that they have. They provide it in different formats, APIs. They have a platform, different visuals that they provide, and they essentially kind of pivoted their entire business model here and moved from B2C to B2B. And that resulted in them also having their first profitable quarter in 2020. And this really kind of shows how it can really be sort of used for strategic advantage. And that's one example that I wanted to kind of talk about today. And the second example here is Walmart. So Walmart, I think, it's been in the news recently as well, but Walmart has also, created their data product, which is called Walmart Luminate. And what it does, is it monetizes the Walmart sales data to provide insights to merchants and suppliers. So, insights on sales, inventory, customer behavior, channel performance, preferences, customer preference. And they have, brought this platform to the market, and, some great stats on, the improvement and the lift they've seen. They've seen a 75% increase in e-commerce revenue since the launch, and 50% growth in the number of suppliers. So it's a really smart thing to kind of sort of create that, flywheel effect where, they are providing back the data to their suppliers and merchants, which in turn, gives them the insight to, further improve placement of products and targeting of customers to, again, increase sales. So some really cool examples of, how companies have leveraged data to their advantage and have made significant strategic advantages. And obviously, this is just a couple of examples. There's a lot more, if you kind of go around thinking, I'm not even talking about the big tech examples here. These are more of the non-traditional companies. Great. So pivoting into, so I want to talk about a little bit about, some of the principles, some of the key principles as you're thinking about building customer-centric data products. We'll talk about 6 of them here. And these are not exhaustive, but some of the key ones that I think are important to keep in mind as you're building data products. So we'll talk about the first one here, which is starting with the user need, right? So this is a fairly, I would say, intuitive one, right? But I wanted to emphasize this because sometimes when it comes to data products, sometimes this can be overlooked. Sometimes you are just over-focusing on the applicability of the data and user needs sometimes because it's a step or two removed from the user end goal. It becomes sometimes, it becomes easy to kind of lose focus on that. But it is really important to connect the dots between, what is really the user need, or what is the pain, what is the user outcome that we want to enable through the data. Because when you start connecting the dots there, it really helps with coming up with better products and more holistic sort of end-to-end solutions. Um, so it's really critical to start with like the end user goal and problem. So as an example, right, if say for instance you have something like you want to enable insights for merchants, but it's really kind of important to hone in on why do we want to provide those insights to merchants, right? So it could be, for example, their objective could really be the end goal really is really to kind of increase their revenue, and which is in turn due to increase in spend on their products. So then you have to kind of peel back the layer there, thinking about, okay, if how do you increase the spend on your products? So one way is to incentivize customers through personalized offers or campaigns for their customers. And then in turn, if you peel that back a little bit further, is like, to understand who are those customers that you would like to incentivize, right? That leads you to think about, perhaps we want to provide some form of segmentation to help, the merchants understand who are those customers, right? So kind of peeling back the layers helps you understand like what are the different forms of insight solutions that you could potentially enable to help the end goal. So it's really critical to kind of start with that end goal, really kind of understand what is the decision they want or what is the action they want to take based off of those insights. That would really help you, uncover the different solutions and sometimes even build like a more holistic solution end to end. And then I think also obviously related with this is just understanding the user persona. Who is the user? How do they want to consume the data? How often do they need it in their decisioning process, right? Do they need it real time? Do they need it ad hoc? Is it a certain period in the, a particular quarter or an year that they are really reliant on this data? And also, depending on who the user is, how do they want to consume the data and what format, right? Sometimes this is critical because it really sort of impacts different facets of your solution, right? The UX of the solution, how you engineer the solution as well may differ based on some of the answers you get as you kind of probe into the user themselves. And for example, as an example, even within Mastercard, we are providing insights on payments data, but there are so many possibilities and so many different use cases depending on who the user is. So, we have operational users whose needs are more kind of, they need more real-time kind of decisioning around authorization and fraud data versus, we also have business users who need more of the business KPIs more on a monthly or a weekly basis. So really kind of understanding who the user is really helps sort of figure out how we'd want to deliver the data and what granularity, frequency, and also mode of delivery. So this is something that is really kind of critical and definitely important to kind of keep in mind and start with as you're thinking through your data products. The next one out here is yes. So around UX, again, another pretty intuitive one is UX. You don't want UX to be an afterthought for your data products. And sometimes, again, as you're thinking about UX can really, it can get a backseat, especially because data products can be pretty technical in nature. But it's very critical, especially the form factor of delivery is more, sort of user facing. Obviously, if you're doing APIs, extracts may not be as critical, but I would argue even in that case, there are other aspects of the user experience that need to be taken into account and consideration, such as documentation, support, etc. But with UX can really sort of help with driving adoption and engagement of data products. Data can be obviously overwhelming and difficult to understand. So how do you make it easy to get insights? How do you make it easy? How do you reduce that complexity, right? And help the user really get to the answer that they are seeking through the data. And also there's another important facet of this is privacy and transparency, right? We'll talk a little bit about this in the later part of this, our conversation today. But UX becomes helpful to really help you drive sort of transparency into, why certain decisions were taken, why certain, how a particular data has been computed, or, to get consent as well, to reduce the friction in the obtaining consent from users when it comes to data. And one example I think personally I find really interesting is the comparison between two data products, both sort of personal financial management tools, Mint by Intuit and Copilot, which is a mobile app, which also is a personal financial management app. And there's a stark difference in how, I mean, they're using the same data, right? That's sort of your transactions, your account data, your investment data, but the way they have, I've been a user of both previously with Mint, then migrated onto Copilot. But with Copilot, you can see the stark difference in how UX can really make a difference in adoption, right? They have been able to reduce the complexity, make it easy to kind of really kind of understand how how you're doing in terms of your own, financial management, and the way they've used colors and call outs kind of has really kind of made a difference in my own engagement and usage of that particular app, which previously when I was using Mint, it was extremely a very frustrating process to use it, and just extracting simple insights out of that data was extremely difficult. So I mean, yes, it's a basic underlying point here is that UX should definitely not be an afterthought. In fact, it is one of the key things as you're thinking about how to build trust in your data, and if you have a extremely user facing use case for delivering insight. So getting to the next principle out here. So as you're building, as you're thinking about building your data product, you've, sort of honed in on the use case based on the user outcome that you want to enable. You thought you've enabled your UX team to also think about, sort of the design and the customer experience. I think one of the key things as well to do is really sort of get a great understanding of your data, right? Obviously, it's a data product. You need to understand your data sources, what your data looks like, what are some of the key kind of attributes associated with the data source, understanding the data ownership, right? Do you own the data, right? Are you the primary owner of the data? So in some cases, you may have a partnership, but if there are new use cases, you may want to think about, do you have the rights to kind of apply that data to other new use cases as well? So kind of understanding that is also critical. And then getting into evaluating your data readiness for the use case, right? Understand your data quality, whether it's, do you have the data volume, right? And is it complete? If it's, specific, is it a global use case, right? Do you have the coverage for all of the regions that you're targeting? Do you have the appropriate volume to kind of generate the quality insights for your customers, and is your data complete, right? So those are some of the key aspects to kind of consider as you're thinking about your data being ready for to be employed in the use case. And then the data knowledge. Do you have the data domain knowledge, or do you need to seek some business partners or SMEs to help you really think through the use case? Is also important to kind of think about and evaluate as you are considering a data product. And then, going hand in hand with this is assessing your tech and org maturity. And especially for data products, this becomes quite critical because data products can be complex and could take time, especially depending on the maturity of your own organization. And it's important to kind of be pragmatic about the use cases you can enable. Without evaluating the underlying technology, sometimes, there can be promises made to stakeholders, which may be unrealistic. So it's really critical to kind of go in with the eyes wide open to have a basic understanding of, what are the foundational components that are needed to kind of build your data products. And it's important to set those expectations around, what can truly be enabled in a particular time frame that you may have based on where you are in terms of your maturity. And many organizations, they still have siloed data, right? And, sometimes the data quality is not that great. As an example, for me personally, we had some sales teams come in with some use cases for enabling insights for a particular segment, customer segment. But when we looked at the data, we didn't have the necessary data quality to enable that for, even identifying that particular, those particular clients in that particular segment. And a lot of similar example, so we found some, data quality challenges which have stopped us, right in the beginning because of the fact that the data quality has not been great. And if we take a look at some examples around Gen AI as well, a lot of times, most organizations now, really are excited about Gen AI, and there is a push from senior leadership around testing, experimenting, and implementing Gen AI use cases. But a lot of times, you would hit a roadblock in terms of productionalizing the product due to the fact that the technical infrastructure is not ready for integrations, right? Or it may even take more time, or the data curation for fine tuning would take time because you still have to invest time in collecting that data and make sure it is a quality data, and you have the necessary volume to kind of fine tune the LLMs, right? So all of these are kind of aspects that need to be considered and evaluated. And there was the graph you see over here essentially is a recent study that was published by Scale AI, which talks about some of the top challenges in implementing AI specific technologies. And you can see the first one is really about infrastructure. The tooling or out-of-box solutions don't meet my needs, and then insufficient budget as well, which relates to kind of the changes that need to be made in the technology to make sure it can integrate with sort of Gen AI solutions. So it's one of the things that, before we get too optimistic about certain use cases, is important to sort of evaluate and factor into the roadmap so that you can take into consideration the timelines needed to build that foundation. Okay, so moving on to the fifth point here is really around embedding trust throughout the system. And this is a significantly large topic. And, I'm not an expert in this space. It's a separate discipline in itself. But, I would be remiss if I did not touch upon this as one of the, critical factors for building successful data products. So building trust in data is extremely critical for the success of data and AI products. And, especially now as well with the rapid, with adoption of Gen AI and sort of all the talk around it, responsible AI as a topic has become more important and prevalent, sort of interconnected. But I think the key as product managers, right, is to understand, what are some of the key components that you should keep in mind when you're building data products. And what is also critical is to partner here with the right governance teams throughout the process, with privacy, risk, and compliance, to make sure they are sort of brought in at the right points as you're building the product. So these requirements are also taken into consideration as you're building the data products, and also having a fair understanding of all of the privacy and other domain-specific regulations that impact it. And the first one really is around user privacy, right, with data. And EU has been at the forefront of establishing, regulations around this, with GDPR sort of forcing transparency and ensuring you're getting user consent prior to using the data. So, that's one of the key regulations there. But, for every obviously industry has their own regulations associated with privacy as well. We have PCI compliance, HIPAA for health industry, and then with AI as well, there are additional kind of EU AI acts as well that are now coming into place and being formalized. So I think that's one of the key ones, is to ensure that you're taking into consideration user privacy and keeping that in mind as you're building your products. We spoke a little bit about data quality. It is table stakes. If personally has also experienced this with certain products, if the user has a question or even has a slightest sort of doubt about the quality of the data or the insights, you end up losing trust in the entire solution. So it's really critical to make sure that, you are ensuring data quality of your product, and that's evaluated throughout the course of your product development life cycle. And one of the key things as well is we talk about design, providing transparency via design into some of how certain insights have been computed, so users can understand what certain data elements or certain insights, what do they represent. And also, I think, this can also be used. Design partnering with design again goes back to the point about not making UX an afterthought, is really kind of ensuring that you are embedding trust and transparency via design. Um, you know, uh, we that's really critical, and that can certainly be leveraged to your advantage. And obtaining user consent can sometimes also be induce friction in the process, but leveraging thinking about doing that using your design team, thinking about how you can reduce the friction associated with getting consent is something that should be employed as you're thinking through the end-to-end process as well. And then removing, any kind of bias, especially for AI-enabled products, ensuring that, it complies with some of the, fairness and bias removal sort of standards that are out there is important. So it's critical to kind of evaluate that your AI models are also complying with that, if that's something that you're employing in your data product. And yes, I think just having governance front to manage these risks is really key. And, reviewing upfront as you're designing the product that the data being used is not violating any of the regulations. You're using design to gather consent, creating transparency and trust, and then working with privacy, legal, and compliance throughout the process. And we sort of have a bi-weekly forum with privacy where any kind of new features are reviewed with them, so that we're making sure that we are complying with some of the privacy standards that have been set by our global privacy teams, and we're ensuring that we are using them as a conduit for any other kind of checks that are important for our data products. Great. All right. So moving to the last one, right? So I think as you build data products, a few of the challenges that you can typically encounter is accumulation of insights debt over time. It's very easy to kind of continue to add insights, continue to add data to your product, and it can over time, those insights can really kind of accumulate in the end, and it can inflate sort of your product both from tech debt standpoint, plus also it can reduce the value that the customer is truly getting out of your product, and sometimes it can get you can lose sort of the outcome that you were originally trying to enable for your intended customers. So it's critical to kind of monitor end to end, certain key metrics, not just your key success metrics for the product, but across from the data source to the delivery of the product. There are key metrics that you should be tracking and evaluating on a regular basis to make sure that you're not drifting away from your original goals of the data product. And so it's important to have that instrumentation built for all of the building blocks from the raw data to the end application, so you can quickly understand where performance may be degrading and can take the appropriate action. Right. So, and there's some of the metrics that are listed here. Obviously you have your success metrics around, business, your, customer engagement, the action that you typically associate with, success for your product. But then also around, your system, your data quality, your data explainability, is there any data latency that you're inducing in your product that drifts you away from the SLA that you had originally established? The performance, are users able to retrieve the insights at the same in the same SLA that was established with them. So it's important to kind of understand that, and evaluate and keep in mind as you've built your product and you've launched it. So ensuring that you have not overinflated your product by adding in additional debt of data and insights. So those are some key kind of considerations to keep in mind as you're thinking about building data products. Obviously, these are not the only ones, but some of the key ones that, at least from my experience, I have taken away. Okay. All right. And then let's take a look at some of the monetizing strategies, the direct monetizing strategies that companies have employed. So the first one, which we see with Walmart, Humanate as well, is they offer sort of a platform for insights, and it is really subscription based. They offer a free version, but they also offer a premium version that users can subscribe to. The second type is really the way the data is delivered is through APIs or raw data format, and it's usage. And some of that has been seen with Foursquare, and I think with Reddit as well. And then type three is really an end-to-end solution delivery where you're, building and implementing the solution for a particular, client, and seen pricing models associated with this as being, one-on-one contracts with clients, having sort of a licensing model. And I've seen that at Mastercard, at Visa. And then type four is as a service, where you would also, in addition to sort of delivering a solution, or maybe you don't have a solution, but you're delivering, sort of insights as a service, where you have a team sort of cleaning insights out of the data and providing sort of more of a service-based product to the client. So more of a handheld and providing those insights to the customer. So again, pricing model over here also sometimes is one-on-one contracts, or it could be sort of subscription-based, daily subscription to that service. Great. So I think we are close to kind of the closing it out with sort of the key takeaways, right? We spoke about that, really sort of starting out with, your user outcomes, right? Thinking about that and not sort of straying away when you're building data products, really sort of honing in on what is the end user outcome that you want to enable is extremely key. And, as part of this, really understanding your user persona so you can figure out, what's the impact on the UX as well as the architecture of the solution and the delivery model of your data product. And then really evaluating your data, having a solid understanding of your data is also critical to kind of making sure that you're able to build a successful data product. UX is extremely important. It can help you with adoption and engagement of your product, as well as making sure that you also are able to build in privacy elements and create transparency around the insights in your product as well. And as a result, you have to you make sure that UX and privacy teams are your friends, and you're closely collaborating and partnering with them throughout the end-to-end product development process. And then establishing end-to-end instrumentation, not just for your success metrics, but right from starting from your data source, your data pipeline, your models, as well as to the end application is important. And continuous monitoring so that you can identify any kind of issues before they impact your end customer is important, because things like quality, you cannot compromise on that. And then last but not the least, data products can be complex, right? And they do take time to get right. So, you have to kind of iterate on those, try to get, the kind of insights you're delivering right. And it's also important, going back to kind of the maturity of your organization, it's also important to kind of ensure there is alignment with business and exec stakeholders around what is truly pragmatic based on where your team is at, your company is at, and what is truly achievable within certain timelines. So it's really important to kind of ensure there is clear understanding and alignment of capabilities, data quality, and sort of a holistic view around that. And if there are certain foundational elements that need to be established, those are also taken into consideration as you're thinking about your data product roadmap. Because some of those things, do take time. So I think that's extremely critical as well to kind of make sure there's alignment there. Great. So I think that pretty much covers our conversation for today. John Michael, I probably, think we want to get into questions.
Sure. No, but before we start with questions, Vartika, I want to first thank you for presenting, everything that you did, because I think one of the things that's really I found really fascinating was I remember this was a time when data was very abstract in a sense, and now I think what and then as over time now data products in itself has been applied a very user-centric design thinking. A lot of the product management principles that in terms of creating value for certain user persona types and really understanding core issues is, it's great that the data has evolved to that point, because that way it just really illustrates the importance of it, whether it's internal or internal. So I think, that's one of the things that I really appreciate with your presentation is it wasn't necessarily just, about data, but the right approach to data moving forward. So, just wanted to acknowledge it and thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, before there's a question from the audience. So let me see here. Okay, so considering data products are not easy for people to intuitively use it more, can you share some ideas to drive engagement to get more users when it's tried as free to then monetize it in the future?
So if I'm understanding right, so how do we make it more intuitive? How do we make data products more intuitive to use to drive engagement? Is that what I'm taking
Yeah,
away?
it is a question. I think it's more like adoption, because to me, it's like if you try as free, then monetize in the future. It
Yeah.
sounds like there might be some questions in terms of value or questions in terms of how intuitive is the product itself, whether it's SaaS platform or API based. So I think the question is more around adoption and
Okay.
engagement.
So how do you improve the adoption of your data product?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's not easy to, I cannot directly kind of answer that without understanding what the product is. But in terms of, it's really an iterative process, I would say. If you feel like and again, boils down to kind of what's the value you're delivering, right? If you are, I think the different ways, right? If you have a data product, and you need to, ensure that there is, good success and adoption of that product. I think one of the things you have to kind of really hone in on is ensuring that you truly understand what is the value that you're delivering out of that product, right? So kind of getting that right, like, what is the action that you expect users to, what is the decision uh, that you're enabling, or the action that you're enabling through those insights or recommendations, so whatever the product might be. So really sort of getting that right is very critical. So I think that's one of the key things to really spend a lot of time on, is understanding why would users come here, right? And I think the second part of it is really thinking through the experience part of it, right? Sometimes adoption might be challenging because users are not able to get to the insight that they want, right? They are finding it challenging to, they're finding it difficult to get to the right, it's not easy for them to get to the right kind of answers they're looking for, right, out of the data. So it might be important to also, obviously iterate through that and think about it. So I think value, um, employing kind of the UX aspect of it to make sure that, you're making it easy for the user to get the data. And I think the third part also is to figure out what is the action eventually they want to take. And is there a way to kind of enable that action through your platform, right? If it's a platform, that is, right? Can you bring those two closer? Can you make it easy to kind of get to the next step, not just like leave the leave them just with insights, but give them a way to actually make it actionable, right? And I think that becomes also very critical to eventually lead to the adoption. So it may be, through integration with maybe like some other product that is enabling the action component, or maybe you can enable actions directly through your own platform. So that's where the thinking about the end-to-end kind of goal really helps with um, you know, helping drive, the right value through your product. So
No,
hopefully that answered to some extent. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I really love how you really emphasize, actual insights, because I think we live in a world where there's lots of data. Like a lot of organizations gather data. I think going to an earlier point of your presentation, I think there's a lot of reasons why the data quality may not be good. So, in terms of how to, essentially get to a point where it's actionable, and I think is really, essential in this, like in the digital space, because everyone is looking to gain a competitive edge, whether it's through generative AI, through recommendations.
Yeah.
How do you find discoverability of products across different ecosystems? And I think that's why, I think data is like one of those things where I think I think that understanding that there's a need for it, but in terms of how to operationalize it, depending on where you are on that journey, is I think a really important, skill set to really to understand and evaluate and put an action plan forward, which actually leads into a question I have, me personally. So I have in my experience, I have been exposed to lots of different data, just for context. So I worked in retail, where there's lots of data feeding through different, there's different legacy, like different systems through point of sale and then digital. So there's lots of data. And then I've been in startups where they're not that mature in terms of data. But there's a reason why I'm kind of illustrating these points, because I want to go to something that you said, Vartika, which was, data quality is table stakes. And I kind of want to dive that into a little bit more, because in both those examples that I shared, there's always this question of, when is the data really ready, to really action? And I would love to get your take on it, because like, for example, for retail, if you want to inform like site search recommendations, that data quality has to be super, like, it has some really good high quality data to inform the search algorithm or the recommendations algorithm and experience. So I guess from your experience, how do you sort of evaluate when data is ready to go forward? And like, it can take a philosophical approach of it, but love to get your sort of point of view on this.
Yeah, that's actually that is a difficult kind of question to answer, right? And it does vary from use case to use case, right? When for certain use cases, you know, if data quality is, maybe like 60-70% there, maybe that's fine, if depending on, what's the customer impact and kind of the decision that they want to take based off of that data. So I think there's a little bit of an evaluation to be done of the use case. What is the kind of decision you're enabling? Who the customer is. Potentially, if you are, and also the other aspect of this is, is it, something that they would take decision purely based on that data, or are they going to, utilize some other kind of other data sets, or maybe, they are going to use their judgment as well as part of that whole decision making process as well. So I think those are some components to keep in mind as we're thinking about data quality. Is, what is good enough for a particular use case, that should be determined based on like these different factors. There may be other factors too you want to consider based on, the domain you're operating in, also your business risk, the appetite there, as well. So I think those are some key things to keep in mind as you're evaluating your data quality and making sure sort of, it's 80% there, it's, you do need it to be 100% there. An example being like, for the example that I was giving was, around it was just like a net new use case that we had to enable for, customers. And then we sort of did an evaluation of the data quality to even just correctly identify the transaction sets that were associated with that particular segment of customer. And, it was very low. It was, maybe like 20% accuracy out of the entire, target market. So, that's pretty obvious that, you cannot bring a product into the market with just that very low, data quality kind of, metric. So I think, yeah, I mean, I probably didn't answer your question completely, but I would say, it's a use case by use case basis, and depending on those different factors, I think you just need to kind of evaluate and give a score of, whether your data quality needs to be a particular, standard of a particular standard to, get that use case out to production.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because I think one of the things you said was, what is the impact that, based on the problem you're trying to solve, what is the impact, and how does data inform and like solve that particular use case? So I think, that will inform the criteria of, data quality. Is it more directional, where bias and accuracy can be off by a certain percentage, or is it something where it's so impactful that you're just like, what, it's too much a risk in order for us to be, using the current state of the data. I think that that definitely holds true. One of the questions that came up was, I think you spoke about the importance of UX, and we live in a world where there's a lot of protection around and language around customer consent, so and privacy. So the question is really more around how to best reduce friction in getting customer consent. So I think it's understood, and I think the question is it purely just UX, or do you think there's other things that come into play?
Yeah, to reduce friction with consent. I think it's also, a matter of, GDPR regulations. I mean, they're definitely something to, you have to kind of comply with. So, there could be different ways in which you could, embed it. If, you have multiple products, instead of having to take the consent for each and every product, maybe there is a way to kind of embed it in a, get that once for all products and kind of create that transparency instead of having to do that for each and every product. That could be potentially one way to employ it. A lot of times, I think, obviously, working with privacy, just trying to understand like what are the ways in which you could, kind of be creative, get creative around it. I think is important. I think privacy definitely needs to weigh in on this component heavily, because every company has their own kind of risk appetite around the regulations. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind and make sure you were partnering with them, working through them. And I think that's at least what comes to mind at the moment, or at least what I've seen. But yeah, I mean, UX definitely was one of them. And then just making sure that if you can get consent, get it once, try and get it once for most products, and create a less induce less friction when you're trying to get consent, right, in your products or platform. So that's what I would say.
No, no, I totally appreciate that, because I think let's take like Steve Jobs, for example. I think he once said, customers ultimately are pretty intelligent, so you just need to disclose, the why, like what you need and the why, and let them decide.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that you mentioned before, which came out of a different products accounts forum discussion, was more around education. Like, so it's like, why are you asking for this? And I think, I think there's lots of, great articles on how, we're essentially data mines. Like, you're just one of many, many particles feeding the data mine. So essentially, there's definitely a question of trust for the customer. They don't want to necessarily be monetized. But then if there's limitations in terms of how is the data being used, and how is the privacy ensured? Because I think there's lots of consent and whatnot, but then if it's possible to provide some granularity on how that data is being used, I think
Yeah,
it might be like an education opportunity too.
absolutely. Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
yeah.
I think that is definitely a great point, John Michael. I think, just giving users transparency into, why the data is being asked for. And I think in some cases, if you do that, customers, just as an example, we had digitized, I mean, separate from like this data product, but, digitization of KYC was one of the products I've worked on previously in my career. And in that, one of the principles we employed was this specifically was around, letting customers know why we are asking for that information, why we're asking them again for that information, and what impact it has on the organization, but more importantly on them, and how it helps the company just protect sort of their accounts using that data. So I agree. Like I think that's an important point that creating transparency, education around why the data is being asked for, and I think, incentivizing them, that, with this, you are going to get value out of the product in certain ways, right? I think just kind of making that, helping them understand that, the data is not, is being used to give them value. I think that is also critical to kind of build in or, create transparency around.
Yep, that totally. Yep. No, I was thinking of all these examples in my career, and it's just like what you said definitely hits on those things. So, no, really well said, Vartika. So I was just looking at time. We're actually close to time. So, wanted to, thank you for just taking the time to speak on this really important, relevant topic and around data. So thank you. And for those on the call, we wanted to thank you for attending, and to please be on the lookout in your inbox as we'll be sharing this recording, as well as within the products accounts portal, so you can watch again and share with your colleagues. So, Vartika, no, this is great, and I'm really happy that we connected. And I'm sure that I'm going to ask you questions on the data moving forward. So we'll definitely keep in touch.
Sounds great. Yep. I enjoyed
Thank you
talking about
everyone.
this. Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you.